Die Sprachübertragung beginnt jetzt. Alle Teilnehmer befinden sich im Zuhörermodus.
Welcome to the OrbEEt webinar on the DEC layer. We are happy that you join us today, and we will try to give you some insights on the developments of the project. What is the time frame? So we're going to talk to you about 30 minutes. First of all, I would like to give you an introduction on the organization of this webinar. So what are the rules that we have in place? Then I would hand over to Kostas, who will give you an introduction to the project, its objectives and its background, followed by a demonstration and discussion of the eDEC layer in the project. We will close the webinar with a Q&A session if time allows. So in case you have any questions, please feel free to post them into the chat, and we will try to answer them at the end of the presentation. Just to have some faces for the presenters today, my name is Wilfrid Utz. I come from BOC. We are partner of the OrbEEt project, and I will be the moderator of today's session. So in case you have any troubles in hearing us, or in case of any questions, please post them into the chat message window on the right, and I would try to come back to you. On the other hand, we have Kostas, who will present you the results of the eDEC layer. After you have logged in, you should see now this left-hand screen that you see on the slide on your monitor. And just as a general rule, all microphones are muted within the webinar. In case of questions, as I already said, please type them into the chat. And there's one important message: the webinar is going to be recorded, so you will also have the chance to later on listen to the webinar via YouTube, via video streaming online. Good. So I would now hand over to Kostas to give you an introduction of the project and to have the introduction to the DEC layer.
So good morning. I'm Kostas Tsatsakis. I'm coming from HYPERTECH. Thanks, Wilfrid, for the initial presentation of today's webinar, which is about presenting the eDECs. Before going to the detailed presentation of the eDECs as a development outcome of OrbEEt project, I would like to have a slide presentation of the project in order to get a better understanding of the project OrbEEt. What are the main objectives, what are the main needs, and how we manage to develop a platform. And among the outcome of the work is the Enhanced Display Energy Certificate. So OrbEEt, or Organizational Behavior Improvement for Energy Efficient Administrative Public Offices, is a 3-year project funded by the European Commission. It's a research and innovation project with an aim to develop a framework that goes beyond the standardized display energy certificates and energy performance certifications in order to provide insights, better insights about the performance of the building, and drill in the details of the building and provide a better understanding to the building occupants. So an initial conceptual view of the OrbEEt framework is presented now in your screen. And starting from the bottom layer, which is the sensor data, the aim is to take into account real-time energy and contextual information coming from the sensors installed in premises. This information further correlated with the business processes identified in the building. The application layer of the overall OrbEEt framework is the SER engine, Systemic Enterprise Operational Rating Engine, with an aim to analyze, correlate, aggregate information coming from the sensor devices installed in premises, plus the business processes and organizational characteristics identified in the project, in order to provide the meaningful KPIs that will be further utilized in different ways. Within the project OrbEEt, we managed to produce 2 tools. The one is the Enhanced Display Energy Certificates framework that I'm going to present in details later. This is the eDECs and Enriched Display Energy Certificates tool. And also we have another component developed in the project as a business application, which is the gamification platform that takes into account the KPIs calculated by the SER engine in order to trigger appropriate messages to the end users to promote energy efficient behaviors in premises. The main focus, as mentioned before, is the Enhanced Display Energy Certificates, and this is the the main reason of having this webinar. Before going to the detailed presentation of this tool, it's good to know where we are now in the project. We are following a typical development process for delivering this outcome, the eDEC outcome. So we started early in the project through requirements analysis. Then we proceeded with the design and development of the tool. We had the integration of the eDEC as part of the holistic OrbEEt framework as presented before, and now we are in the middle of this process from month 24 to month 36. We are now actually in month 31 of the project towards validating and testing the eDEC framework at the different pilot sites of the project, which are further highlighted in this slide. We have 4 different pilot sites in the project. The one is placed in Austria. It's the Imperial Palace in Innsbruck, where we are demonstrating the OrbEEt framework. Also, we have 2 municipality buildings, one in Bulgaria and another one in Spain. In Bulgaria, we have the demonstration in Pernik municipality, close to Sofia, while in Spain, we're demonstrating the OrbEEt solution in the Basque Country in Asparena municipality. Also, in order to show the diversity of the OrbEEt demonstration, we have an institute, a research institute in Germany, in Erlangen, where we are also demonstrating the concept of eDEC with special focus on the demonstration of the enhanced display energy certificates, which I'm going now to present the overall concept, the ideas behind this tool, and how we are managing to demonstrate this and promote this as a commercial solution that from our side should be considered as the, let's say, the standardized approach towards building performance certification. Going down to the details, the overall idea is to provide an enhanced human-centric performance framework that, among others, could promote behavioral energy efficiency in buildings. Before going to what is exactly the enhanced display energy certificate, it's good to highlight what is in general energy performance certificate. Most of you may be familiar with this term, energy performance certification, or labeling, energy building labeling, but it's good to provide some insight about the history of this certification process. So at the mid of 2000s, there was a discussion around Europe on the way that we're going to have the energy performance certifications. There were 2 main trends around Europe towards this process. The first, which is the dominant approach even in our days, it's the asset rating certification, which takes into account the construction characteristics of the building, the static characteristics of each building, an initial analysis from an engineer, and by taking into account some energy simulation tools, they manage to provide a rating for the building. As you can understand, the main drawback of this approach is that we have a static representation of the energy performance. Even by changing the use of the building, this is not reflected to the initial asset rating, and thus this is just an initial estimation of the typical energy consumption of the building and nothing more. Maybe the usage of the building is not representative, and thus we are having high differentiation between the asset rating defined in the building at the early stage and the actual operation of the building. A step beyond this static asset rating representation is the operational rating approach, which is an approach that is mainly applied in the United Kingdom. The main differentiation with asset rating is that, apart from taking into account only the static characteristics of the buildings, the engineer is taking into account also the actual energy consumption of the building. How they manage to do this? Once per year, they're going to the meter, the electricity meter or the gas meter of the building. They're taking into account these measurements, annual measurements about gas and electricity consumption. And by taking into account these values, they are updating once per year the operational rating of the building. So the added value compared to the asset rating is that at least the calculation of the operational rating of the labeling of the building is taking into account actual measurements, aggregated measurements coming from the building performance, the actual building operation. The thing is that both approaches are not covering the details, the insights about the energy consumption, and this is what we are highlighting in our study. What we are missing is the core aspect of the building, the fact that we are not taking into account the role of occupants in the building, which is a fundamental aspect towards understanding energy consumption, because the occupants are the initiators about any energy used in the building, and thus we should correlate this information, occupancy information, with the total energy consumption. In addition, the energy consumption, the final energy consumption is not independent from the environmental conditions. The main usage of consumption is mainly related to devices like heating, cooling, or lighting, which are the main loads, especially in public buildings. And these loads are directly linked with the environmental conditions. So if we are not taking into account these ambient conditions, then we are missing the core aspect of energy consumption, which is how the environmental conditions affects the final usage of the building. Tightly related also, and going to the third point, with the occupants information, is not only information about presence and absence of occupants, but also information having to do with the actual operation of the users. So, especially in tertiary buildings, the occupants are performing some activities which are tightly linked with the energy usage. So it's mandatory to better understand the usage of the buildings through the activities performed in premises, through the different organizational characteristics, and correlate this with the energy consumption of the building in order to better get insights about the energy performance. Needless to say that this dynamic aspect should be further incorporated with the usage of the different devices. So by having information from the usage of devices, we have a better understanding of the energy consumption of the building. And also this mandates for a baselining, not based on actual measurements, but a dynamic baselining approach that should take into account the inherent characteristics of the buildings, the input parameters mentioned before, towards getting a better understanding about total energy consumption. These dynamic factors about energy use were initially identified in the project. So it's mandatory to go down, to drill down in details having to do with the lighting usage, with the usage of the office devices, with the main usage of HVAC and additional usages that may be defined in the building, get a better understanding of how these dynamic factors affect the total energy consumption. And the most important from our side is to incorporate in the overall analysis the occupancy related data. And we are doing this with two approaches. The first is by incorporating the activities, the business processes performed in the building through a detailed business process modeling defined in premises. And how we are doing this? We're taking into account occupancy characteristics plus the schedule information, how the users are performing in different zones of each building during different periods of the day or different periods of the year. By having this initial representation of the business activities, we have a better understanding of the role of occupants in premises, setting an additional aspect in our analysis. And the second layer on how we are managing the role of occupants in building premises is by incorporating comfort profiles in the overall analytics process. We have an internal mechanism that takes into account, once again, occupancy characteristics with the contextual conditions in premises. We are talking mainly about temperature, luminance, and humidity, and by correlating this information, we manage to extract accurate comfort profiles of the users that can be further translated to correlation of comfort profiles with the actual energy usage of the buildings. By having this information and going back to the overall architecture, we can have a better understanding towards the definition of the KPIs in building premises that will further support the calculation of the indicators related for the enhanced display energy certificates. So this is more or less the idea of the enhanced display energy certificates, to take into account information coming from the different device types examined in the project. So we drill in to specific devices, to monitoring the consumption of specific devices, take into account real-time data coming from this data, and also take into account huge volumes of data. So we're taking data in a 10 minutes granularity, enabling us to calculate in real time or near real time the consumption of each specific device type, and by aggregating this information, we get better insights about the usage of specific zones, or specific people, or specific activities that are running in premises. So the main concepts behind enhanced display energy certificates, and by having this presentation of the overall concept, is to move from the static representation of typically the asset rating, or in the UK of operational rating, to a dynamic tool, a web application that enables end users to get insight with a typical format that they have seen in the past, but in a dynamic way, meaning that the users can drill in to specific zones, as we have device level monitoring, also to select a time period and get insight about the typical statistics of the building, the typical energy performance operational rating, where they are familiar with, the usage of energy, the CO2 emissions consumption, comparative analysis with previous operational periods. But this enhanced display energy certificate is further enhanced, as is the name of this product, with additional KPIs incorporating the new aspects that we are introducing in the project. And these are mainly the organizational aspects. By better managing the different business processes are running in premises, so we can have certification, energy certification and labeling of the different business processes. And also we are incorporating comfort parameters, comfort aspects as part of the certification process. With this information, the business analysts of the building can have a better understanding of the consumption of the business processes and may proceed with recommendations about changes of the business processes, or even further, the energy analyst of the building can have a better comparative view among the different energy performances. By incorporating the overall analysis comfort aspects, we get a better understanding on how the comfort aspects, common comfort aspects, can be correlated in order to get a better, let's say, a more representative view of the energy performance and certification. So overall, as I said before, is how we move from low-level granularity data, device-level information, coming in near real time to our platform, further correlated with characteristics of the buildings, in order to provide additional KPIs that are further transformed in the enhanced display energy certificate view. Some insights, some additional comments about the usage of this enhanced display energy certificate, how this information can be further consumed as meta information for additional uses, is presented in the following slides. First, we have the usage of the enhanced display energy certificate as a means for triggering the behavior of occupants to more energy efficient behaviors. So what is commonly seen in our days is that we have aggregated information available per building or per household, available this information to the end users through an indirect way. So the users are mainly taking a bill about their energy consumption, and by having this information in a persistent way, for example, once per month, they can get triggers to reduce their energy consumption, and they have quantified through different surveys the impact of this notification at around 3%. By having the information through the enhanced display energy certificates, and we are talking about direct feedback, as these enhanced display energy certificates are updated in near real time, and also by drilling down to space level information, to zone level information per building, or even per device type, and providing additional insights about the usage of devices, we can move from this low level, the 3% potential of energy reduction, consumption reduction, to up to 12% of energy consumption reduction by providing better feedback, by providing better messages as retrieved from the enhanced display energy certificates analysis. A second and very important hint having to do with an enhanced display energy certificate demonstrate is outcome, let's say, of our analysis, because we saw that by going down and drilling down to device level information in near real-time analysis, we need to adopt a, let's say, baselining, a hybrid baselining approach in order to address the specificities from in the project. So most of you are familiar with IPMVP baselining that promotes the idea of having annual baselining or simulated baselining. The annual baselining is highlighted with option C, or let's say the option D defines the simulation-based baselining. What we are highlighting as a meta product, let's say, of the enhanced display energy certificates work in OrbEEt project is the fact that we need to adopt a hybrid approach toward baselining, because this is not just a single approach or single standard that fits to all cases. And in our case, where we're going in low-level information, in device-level information, having this information in short periods of time, we need to adopt an approach that starts from the annual base analysis, going down to the simulated analysis, and finally leading to the option B as defined in the IPMVP approach, by having device level monitoring and adaptation of baselining based in this device level analysis. And this is highlighted also on the graph that it's not it's not mandatory to go in an annual based analysis, but we can drill down. Once we have information at that level of granularity, we can drill down to each device operation and see how this device performs during the day. And by having this hour by hour or minute by minute analysis, we can better estimate what is the baseline expected by each device, what is the expected consumption of each device, and how a measurement, contemplation measurement taking place in building premises can further affect the total energy consumption of the building. These two, how we can use enhanced display energy certificates as a means for triggering messages to the end users and highlighting the need of a hybrid baselining, are the two, let's say, meta products defined from the work performed in terms of enhanced display energy certificates, and now is tested in the 4 pilot sites of the project. The feedback that we get from the pilot validation process is that the end users are willing to accept that type of framework of the enhanced display energy certificates framework in order to get a better insight, to get insights about the energy consumption of their buildings. They now have a better understanding of the energy consumption in premises. Also, they are interested to have these sensors required for the enhanced display energy certificates calculations installed, because even these sensors are considered as a means of engaging the end users to get a better understanding about the energy consumption, and willing to get continuous use into the system in order to have a better insights about their energy performance in the building. And in order to be more practical, it's now good to have a quick view on how this eDEC visualization is actually taking place in premises. So we have selected a zone in Imperial Palace of Innsbruck where we have the system installed in order to see how this framework is applied and how the end users can access the system and get insights in terms of energy performance certification. By selecting a specific zone, a specific time period first, which is the time filter option provided by the tool, we can get insights for each specific zone of the building. So we can drill in, select a specific zone, and for this specific period, which is August 2017 period, we can see the overall energy performance of the building. Also, the total CO2 emissions of this period compared to the previous periods in the past, month periods in the past. Also, operational rating, plus additional information having to do with the performance of the different business processes, energy performance, of course, and also information having to do with the comfort KPIs defined in the project. In addition to this view, the users may select device types in order to get insights about the consumption of each specific device in premises, and also they can select business processes over a specific time period and get insight about the business processes. By having the filter applied, you can see that the business process is taking place in 3 different rooms, utilizing devices coming from these 3 zones, and then by selecting one of these 3 zones, we can have a detailed view of the energy labeling of this specific business process. So we once again get insight about the performance of the business process. We can have the information in the past compared to the real-time performance of the business process, and thus the user can get a better insight about the role of occupants correlated and linked with the different business activities and how this affects the total energy consumption of its specific business process in premises. So by ending this presentation in this point, it's good to have a recap of what is energy performance certificate and how we promote the concept of the enhanced display energy certificates. The overall idea is to move from the static representation of the energy labeling of a building, which remains at the bottom in the basement, and nobody cares about this static representation information about energy consumption, to a dynamic tool that is available to the building occupants, instantiated to the different zones of the building, having the user to interact with this web application, selecting specific time periods of interest or zone of interest, or even business processes of interest, in order to have a better understanding about the performance of the building, of its specific zone, which is of interest for the end user, and in general have an interaction tool where different type of information is available in a dynamic way and understandable by the end users of the building. Of course, there are different views of the tools available for the facility managers in order to have a holistic approach, but the overall philosophy is to have this dynamic approach. And this is our, and ending with this comment, is our let's say, plan for further commercialization of this concept. We want to push this concept as a standardized approach that enables the end users to have a standardized methodology to get better insights about the energy performance of the buildings. And that's it from my side. I don't know if you have any questions to ask about the OrbEEt project, or for specific questions having to do with the enhanced display energy certificates.
Okay.
I feel free to answer these questions.
Thank you very much, Kostas. Thank you for the presentation. I will just take the screen back for a second that we can see. One moment. What is going on here? Just to make sure that we see my screen again. All right, I will just share my screen quickly again over here. Thank you for the great walk through the system that we have just seen. I just want to close today's webinar with asking if there are any further questions on the tools and the concept presented. I saw that we had some chat messages here, so we will follow up on that one offline afterwards. In case you would like to stay in touch with us, please find here our email addresses and our contact details, so just drop us an email in case you're interested and would like to continue the work on OrbEEt and especially the eDEC system. Thank you very much for joining. Looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.